Hi Year 10, here's Miss Payne again. We're going to get a little bit spooky today. We're going to start to have a look at the impact of the scene that involves Banquo's ghost. So we're going to evaluate the events of Act 3, Scene 4 and really start to think about what this presents, not just about Macbeth's decisions and actions, but also about feelings of guilt, which obviously run like invisible threads throughout the whole play. Please take a moment to pause, jot down the title and the information. Now, to start today's lesson, we're not going to begin with a retrieval quiz, but it's almost like retrieval sentences today. And I want you to think back to your learning yesterday, where you guys were looking at imagery, and you were really thinking about how imagery created atmosphere. So your question, just to write a few sentences, please, try to use evidence that you have in your table from yesterday's session. How does Shakespeare use language and imagery to create atmosphere in Act 3? Write down the question, write your answers in silence. You've got 3 to 5 minutes, so when you're ready, please, Mr. or Mrs. or Miss Supply Teacher, could you please press pause and let the students go. Now, as your general starter in today's session, the really questions to think about, what is Macbeth's state of mind at this point? So think about how he is, think about the journey that he's been on, think about the act of regicide, think about how his attitude to kingship is, think about his ideas of the barren sceptre and the fruitless crown, think about that whole soliloquy. So all of those things need to formulate your response to that. And then I want you to think about the big idea that underpins everything in this unit, which is of course ambition. And what has ambition led to so far? Think about the positives and the negatives. Now again, this will take you about 3 to 5 minutes. You can map this or bullet point it, but just make sure that you've got it written in a format so that when you come back to Year 11, that your sorry about this, that your notes are very clear for you to understand, okay? So just make sure you're presenting it in a way that's going to be very, very clear. Pause and go. Now, once again, I've lifted the summary details for Act 3 and Scene 4 ahead of you guys reading it and performing it as a class. I want you to feel free to jot anything down. On Google Classroom, I'm also going to put annotations for this scene, and you guys will have to do this for your homework. I'm not going to let this fall behind, and I will be checking your copies of the play to make sure that you've done it. So if the supply teacher again could just pause, read through these with you so that you know exactly what it is you're going to be reading in just a second. So pause and go. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do some posh mind maps or quotation explosions, and this is where you really get the chance to be creative, because as an examiner, I've got to reward students who have really sophisticated and unique interpretations of what Shakespeare is trying to present. The problem that we have is that students feel the need to write down everything that their teacher tells them in an exam. But for an examiner, that's very boring when you're reading 30, 32 identical responses from one centre. So you've got to start getting the confidence as a skill for both your GCSE language and literature to be able to extrapolate or gain or take information from quotes as you see them. So in an extract, for example, in a scene, for example, you need to be able to pull out what you think are the most important things and try to make some different interpretations as to why that could be. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to select 5 quotes from this scene and really summarise Macbeth's thoughts and feelings at this point in the play and analyse them. So in order to do this, I need you to zoom in on key words. So in order to get this right, you have to look at what is used, why it's used, the effect on the audience, and indeed the events of the play. Try to link to themes if you can. So thinking about the supernatural, thinking about all of that stuff and what is revealed, you know, about how they continue or how they change over the course of the events. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate the amount of detail that you need to go into for this. And you guys are going to have to write these down in your books and fill in any gaps that I leave. Okay, here we go. So the first quote that we've got is a key one, loving this one. Thy bones are marrowless, thy blood is cold. So I'm going to start on the left in the middle, okay, and I'm going to start off by summarising this quote. What do I understand it to mean? So here is my comment. In this quote, Macbeth is describing Banquo's ghost. That's all he's doing. And then I'm developing my ideas a little bit more as I go up, and you're going to finish the sentence for me. Macbeth is describing the ghost. He is feeling what? Repetition of B sounds, the plosives, remember? Okay, think about that. We've got bones and blood. It creates the effect of what? Finish that for me too. I'll invite you to pause this in just a moment. How does the temperature of blood contrast with the ghost? Answer it. Really think about that. You've got to go into it. You've really got to think about these things. Blood is associated with violence and murder, which shows that Macbeth cannot stop thinking about what he has done. So I'm thinking about the motif there. Remember, we talk about motifs that run through the whole course of the play. You've got to consider it. I do hope you've read these scenes, by the way. I forgot to mention that after the summary, you should have read those. So I'm hopeful that if you haven't done that after I've demonstrated the next one as well, you guys will be able to go back, read through as a class and start looking for those quotes. So the next little one I need you to write into your book is this one. Thou canst not say I did it. Never shake thy gory locks at me. Now my voice is about to go. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, could the teacher in the room press pause, please? And I'd like you to go through each of these, encouraging the students to be able to write down and fill in the gaps, write down these ideas and to add any of their own as well. Now, when I do pause in just a minute, I will then get you guys to go through, choose another 3 or 4 or even 5 if you're feeling sophisticated. Explode the quote in as much detail as you can, thinking of as many different interpretations as possible. And so try to really think about Shakespeare's use of language. It's very important that you understand that, okay? I want you to focus on the banqueting scene as well, okay? Although there is another scene that follows that you're going to be invited to read or should have read already, please can you make sure that you're focusing on this one? I hope that's clear. I feel like I've muddled myself up a little bit, but if you could just pause at this point, take some time to deal with this quote and make your annotations, and then spend around 15 to 20 minutes going through and doing your own. So pause and go. Now for the next bit of the lesson, I'm going to ask you to use point, evidence, explain as a minimum. I'd like to see some analysis too. Now there's 4 questions and I'm expecting you to take at least 15 minutes to answer them. And I want you to think about how they increase in difficulty as we go through. Now I'd like you to think about analysing the use of language, really making sure that you drill down by zooming in on keywords and devices that Shakespeare is using. So again, could you please pause, take your time and do these in absolute silence. The bell's just tolled for you. Let's move on. I'd like you now, if there is time in the lesson, to self-assess your work. So if the teacher will again pause it, I want you to drill down and focus on what you've done well. Now, the success criteria for this today is making sure that you have understood and that you've really unpicked the language. And so in your answers, you've got lots of reference to individual words and features that Shakespeare's using. Okay, I'm going to leave you with that. I think that's definitely going to be at least a lesson, possibly will take you over a little bit more. So take care, Year 10, and I'll hopefully see you very soon.